welcome to Unreligiously. On this channel, we talk a lot about deconstructing. Even when we're not talking about it, it's still pretty much going to come up in one of my videos. But I don't know if I've ever made a video talking with you guys about deconstruction specifically before. Talking about what it is, what it can look like, where you might end up, and why a lot of Christians are saying that deconstruction is a toxic trend.
So I've noticed a ton of pastors and churches have sermon series going on right now about why deconstruction is the devil. Let me tell you what's really going on. They don't want you asking questions. They don't want you chipping at the dam to try to see what answers are on the other side, because they know as soon as there's a pinhole, there's a flood coming.
On Desiring God, which is a Christian website for those of you who didn't grow up in the church, one of their articles states that deconstruction is a term that has increasingly been used in evangelical circles, especially over the past decade.
Deconstruction is a term that has increasingly been used in evangelical circles, especially over the past decade. But it is a confusing term because there's no single or simple definition for deconstruction. It has different meanings in different contexts. It has technical meanings in certain academic contexts and various informal meanings when current and former evangelicals use it to describe their or others' faith experiences. It's not surprising that many are asking some form of, what does deconstruction even mean? It's an important question and needs clarifying answers. Certainly more answers than I can adequately cover here.
That part of the article does an excellent job at detailing the confusion surrounding the term, and I even agree with the author that no video or article can really truly be comprehensive in understanding everybody's deconstruction experience. For my Christian audience, it's like how defining what a testimony isn't the same as hearing hundreds of personal testimonies from lifelong faithful Christians. It's the same with deconstruction. It's a word used to label an experience, a process that is gut-wrenching, devastating, highly personal, and different for every single person who goes through it. My personal definition of deconstruction and what I am saying when I'm talking about it on this channel is going through a process of unlearning religious beliefs or constructs in comparison with the actual religious literature, modern science, and your lived experience. When you unlearn the foundations of your belief, it's not a smooth process, you guys. You hit a lot of bumps. You might turn back on the journey a few times, and you might pretend like you're not on a journey at all. When you take your religion apart brick by brick, there's no certain outcome. For some people, they're able to rebuild stronger than before with a vibrant faith that's in line with their personal beliefs in life, and they're happy with that. For others, they land like I do as an agnostic atheist. Maybe they end up landing just as an atheist, and maybe they're spiritual and they explore and land in another religion altogether.
Sometimes deconstruction is seen by more conservative Christians as a move toward anything goes relativism. However, I would argue the opposite. It seems inevitable that our own upbringing, experiences, personality, race, and sexuality influences how we engage the world. It impacts how we read the Bible, understand our place in the world, and what kind of God we have. That's true for conservative Christians, progressive Christians, Catholic Christians, atheists, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, etc. We are all influenced by what we call our social location. In other words, we all see the world relative to our experiences. I'm more worried by the relativism of conservative Christians who think they have the God's eye view of the world, and so impose that view on others without recognizing that they are also limited.
For Christians in the United States Evangelical Church, the idea of losing your faith is a horrific thought. Losing your faith will damn you to hell. God will take his blessings away from you. His hand is going to be off of your life, and you will likely lose friendships and relationships over it. But again, the damning to hell part is the worst part. It's pretty bad. It's not just the eternal torture and suffering. It's not just the idea, if you subscribe to a more mild version of hell, that you're separated eternally from both God and your loved ones. It's this uncertain ending, the possibility that the road might lead you to a different destination than your friends, that I believe is the main source of fear for those that seem to disagree with deconstruction just on the face of it. But back to the article.
So, what does deconstruction even mean? It means different things in different contexts. It is a postmodern philosophical label that has been adopted by current and former evangelicals to sometimes mean navigating a faith crisis, to sometimes mean identifying harmful cultural influences that distort the true gospel, to sometimes mean questioning and rejecting traditional evangelical doctrines and authority figures, or to sometimes mean departing the Christian faith altogether. Deconstruction isn't new. Since the church's earliest days, some have endured faith crises. Some have been harmed by sinful cultural influences. Some have questioned traditional doctrines and church authorities. And some have departed the faith. But it's helpful to keep in mind that a deconstructing Christian is often someone in significant pain. Anyone, like me, who has gone through a faith crisis, or multiple ones, knows that it's not some abstract academic exercise. Questioning our foundational beliefs and wrestling with doubts about them often feels like we're being, in Francis Schaeffer's words, torn to pieces. If you read more in depth about Schaeffer's faith crisis and reconstruction process, you will see how disturbing, disorienting, and frightening it can be to experience or to watch a loved one experience.
I think this works well with my personal definition that I gave to you guys, but let's just simplify it even further. It's the opposite of a testimony. Sure, those who rebuild even stronger will likely include the deconstruction process in their testimony, but during that brief period of tearing down, it feels like the opposite of a testimony, and it looks like it too. It's a brave, necessary, painstaking process that I encourage everybody to go through, whether it's Christians understanding their own beliefs better or it's others leaving religion altogether. It's the process of making belief truly your own in a way that isn't inevitable with age. There are many people in any given religion who have never truly questioned it in a meaningful way. Even if you're right, knowing why you're right is just as important. Now that we've broken down the definition, or at least I hope that I've provided some level of clarity for you guys, we've cleared up the misconception, hopefully, that deconstruction has to end in atheism. I want to talk to you guys now about why people deconstruct. Deconstructing is painful, it's hard, and to be honest, no one who loves their faith really wants to do it. So why do people? There are a few reasons that I think it's become so popular. It's not just that we're smarter than our parents' generations or have things more figured out. I think that there are a few things that are culturally happening right now that are pushing people to reconsider their positions on things. First, many people are deconstructing for political reasons. It's difficult to ignore how closely intertwined American evangelical Christianity has become with politics.
Something that I've overwhelmingly heard and that I grew up with since I used to be a fundamentalist evangelical is that the Republican Party is the only one that aligns with Christian values. Once I got out of Christian fundamentalism, I realized that I had experienced a lot of brainwashing and indoctrination into only being able to vote for one party. And so I'd love to explain the reasons why I'm a Christian that votes Democrat.
Over time, evangelicalism has shifted from being a religious identity to functioning in many spaces as a political one. Political movements and public figures openly court the evangelical voting bloc, sometimes regardless of whether their values and actions actually meaningfully align with the faith that they're appealing to.
I'm wondering what one or two of your most favored Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal, so I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that you like?
No, I don't want to do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible... The whole Bible is an incredible... I joke... very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time. But I just think the Bible is just something very special. We have to bring religion back into the country, and we're starting to do that, I think, at a very high level. You see churches are starting to fill up again.
For many people raised in church, this creates deep tension. When you grow up hearing that love, humility, and care for others are central to the Christian message, it can be painful to reconcile that with what is often modeled publicly. It becomes harder when faith is used as a tool for political influence. When pastors speak from the pulpit about elections, or when religious leaders are invited into political spaces in ways that blur the line between spiritual guidance and loyalty.
to the place right now, if you vote Democrat, I don't even want you around this church. You can get out. You can get out, you demon. You can get out, you baby butchering election thief. You cannot be a Christian and vote Democrat in this nation. I don't care how mad that makes you. You get pissed off as you want to. You cannot be a Christian and vote Democrat in this nation. They are God-denying demons that butcher babies and hate this nation.
This blending of faith and political power can make it difficult to hold on to the idea that God's kingdom is not tied to any nation or government. For some, this dissonance becomes a breaking point, not because they're rejecting faith itself, but because they're struggling to recognize it in the version being presented to them. Second, religious teachings brought into popular culture have harmed a lot of people and become a part of the public discourse. A goofy but still kind of harmful example of this is purity rings. Even if you didn't grow up religious, if you're around my age, you probably remember the Disney Channel purity ring craze. The Jonas Brothers all had purity rings and were interviewed as minors on their future sexual encounters, their intentions for them. Whether you grew up in the church or not, you were likely impacted by Christian modesty rules brought about by religious institutions. You likely felt shame at some point over a relationship that you shouldn't have had or in some way brushed up against purity culture. For those of us that did directly grow up in it, there were a lot of promises that never came true, and for those who waited and never received what they promised, they went knocking on pastors and youth pastors' doors asking where their spouse was, asking where their kick-ass sex life was, and they were told that they were misunderstanding the scripture. Those things were never promised to them. They were never lied to, they just misunderstood.
Three lies purity culture made me believe. Women are the gatekeepers of men's sexuality. Before you're married, we had to decide the boundary and keep the boundary. And then after you're married, you have to please him so he doesn't leave or cheat on you and be the best wife you could possibly be in bed and expect to always like it and have obligation sex. Number 2, if you wait till marriage to have sex, you have the perfect, wonderful sex life. It'll be better than anything you've ever imagined. I experienced painful sex for 2 years and it was really bad and I have vaginismus and didn't know it. So yeah, that's definitely a lie. It's wrong for a woman to have a sexual desire. Hear me out. When I was in high school, and when anyone's in high school, your hormones are crazy. You are desiring things, and you feel a lot of shame for that. You feel bad for that. The boys are expected to have that, and that's like totally normal, totally okay. The girls, absolutely not. We have to be perfect and pure and have only pure thoughts. When growing up, it's a normal thing to have sexual desire. That's a good thing. God gave us that. That is a beautiful thing. It is not something to feel ashamed about or that it's a bad thing. Honestly, it should be like, yay, good, you're growing up. That's a good part of it. But instead, it's seen as a really negative thing and a bad thing, and that's just not true.
Things like purity culture caused people to dive into their own specific topic where they felt lied to, and they realized, yeah, the Bible might not have actually ever said that, but they distinctly remember it being said to them in sermons and in the books they read. And to you guys, if you grew up secular, it might not seem that serious, but for most of us, that one issue that we just couldn't reconcile or we swear that we didn't misunderstand because it was taught to us in every single youth sermon and preached from every pulpit, that one issue makes us realize how much the church got wrong, or at least how much I did. And now you have to decide if you believe in what is essentially an entirely new faith. That is deconstruction. And third, we have the popularization of documentary series like Shiny Happy People and YouTube creators who are doing incredible work like Fundy Fridays, God is Gray when they were making videos, and Liz Hunter. These types of channels seriously helped make this conversation mainstream and allowed more people to realize the absurdity of certain previously held beliefs. I myself have benefited immensely from 1,000 different books, channels, and research papers on these topics, blogs and documentaries. But the problem? Go back and look at the date on all of these. I started the deconstruction process probably around 2014. Please don't quote me on that, for the love of God, it was a process, but I was still religious. While I was still religious, I was searching for answers. And I'm lucky because the 2010s is when all of this work started coming out. And by 2015, there were a handful of amazing creators and a few books on purity culture. And by the 2020s, the fundamentalist sector of the evangelical church was actively a conversation. When COVID hit, the conversations about homeschooling suddenly turned from being interpreted as an attack on religious freedom to a conversation about the quality of education, how to access resources, and the ethics behind it. Ex-homeschoolers started speaking up. These conversations and the internet made it possible for people to connect, people to share stories, and for people to start identifying clear patterns in mistreatment and the mishandling of abuse, and for people to identify what in their own life may have not been healthy or even normal.
See that, Hadley? You know what that is? It's a government training center where they tell you what to say and when you can say it.
I kind of think it's the responsibility of Christian parents to make sure when their kids come home from school talking about evolution to let them know that it's not right.
It's a pop quiz. It's 12 times 12.
I don't know that one.
Okay. How about 6 times 6? 5 times 5.
25.
Not so hard on the math. More on Bible. That's all right.
Okay, yeah. How did the world begin?
By God creating light.
See how there's no windows on the side? And see underneath where there's like a pod thing? What's that, right? Take a look at this wreckage. See how there's no plane parts on the ground there? What does that look like?
A missile.
All of these things contribute to people deconstructing. Christians on TikTok scrolling will eventually get hit with a video making religion look bad and leaving them questioning things, or at least Googling them. And even an atheist will at some point land on an Owning the Atheists debate video clip and maybe do a little more research, or at least think that the Christian maybe made a good point. People are talking about these things a lot more frequently, and with people from a much wider variety of backgrounds, and that comparison is everything. Being able to compare experiences, determine what is or is not normal, and to zoom out of your own experience can provide you with invaluable context. All of these things push people to take a hard look at their beliefs, where they come from, and maybe they perhaps are doing this even more than previous generations. The internet has changed things for everyone. People share their stories on mass scales, and people they've never met in countries they've never been to, in cities they've never heard of before, can relate to exactly what they're saying. That type of communication spreads. And when people with almost nothing in common experience the same harm over and over again at the hands of the same religious institutions, it makes us question things. How can the God of love be in the building when the building houses people protecting abusers and upholding racist, sexist, and homophobic ideologies? So where does this leave the deconstructing? All of these topics are heavy and they impact every area of our lives. The reasons behind deconstruction vary as greatly as the reason behind why people might choose to join a religion. I've given you guys 3 categories of reasons, but there are so many more that I could ever list. I could make an infinite number of videos on the reasons why people deconstruct, what life situations might lead them there, and each are just as personal as the next. Each are just as valid. Each is just as gut-wrenching to run into, and each carries the same potential weight of eternal damnation or ostracization from your community for even thinking that way. So where does it leave the people deconstructing, like I said? Does that leave everyone doomed to become the caricature of an angry internet atheist? Of course not. Some people do choose to stay in their religion, but with new perspective on things. These people might feel that they have a renewed faith and a strengthened belief. They may come through the deconstruction process feeling stronger and closer to God than they ever have before. And this gets tricky, because it's not just people growing up in fundamentalist evangelical churches that then see the light and then switch to, for example, a progressive church, focusing on openness and acceptance and love, which I would agree with, but it's not always that process. There's a shift even right now towards people seeking more fundamentalist versions of religion, more liturgy, more rules, and in large part due to society's overall deconstruction. So this is not to say people always end up in a more progressive viewpoint, which is what I personally would prefer, but obviously I can't tell you guys what to do. This is to say, deconstruction doesn't end where I want it to for everyone, right? This is something that is really misunderstood within the church because lots of Christians fear the word deconstruction, thinking that liberal atheists are encouraging steadfast Christians to abandon their God and embrace a life of sin and pleasure. But deconstruction is the process of making faith your own, of reconsidering your beliefs and how you came to the conclusions that you did. It's about finding where you truly land in relation to religion and spirituality. It's about checking your assumptions and the source notes on what you've been taught. There are tons of active Christians who have deconstructed and would say they're better off for it now. One Christian that I know and love and is hugely inspirational to me in my own life went through their own deconstruction, although they would never call it that. And when they see this, they'll probably call me to clarify that it wasn't deconstruction, but it was. But they would say that it wasn't because they never left Jesus. They never left the church. They always clung to their faith. And to me, what makes this particular period in their life a deconstruction was their searching, their intentional searching for answers. They deeply studied the controversial topics and read the entire Bible several times over to determine for themselves. They also watched debates between Christians and atheists, taking notes and looking up both sides, looking into the science. And then when they felt confident about their beliefs, they wanted to make sure they weren't missing things in other religions. And so then this Christian believer of mine, read the Quran. And with the same fervor that they read the Bible, this Christian loved one taught themselves Arabic. I'm not joking with you guys. They wanted to understand the culture more. They wanted to learn the basics of the language and are now able to elementary school level communicate in Arabic. And they did all of that to just understand. But reading a book whose culture you don't understand can be complicated too. And so they also, in addition to learning Arabic, joined sites for people learning new languages and connected with Arabic speakers in other countries trying to practice their English. And they respectfully brought up topics about religion to learn more. And later on, they studied other religious books. And they still ended up landing in basically the same place, but a much more open-minded place than they did before, with a much broader understanding of world religion and the world in general. They have much more compassion and love and appreciation for other cultures and religion now. And they have connections and relationships to people who believe differently than them, and they love them. They would never consider that deconstruction, but I would, and that process was beautiful. And even though they ended up in Christianity, I think that process is what makes faith something that can truly be yours and truly be valuable. That story inspires me. That's why I'm sharing it with you guys. That person inspires me. And although they've landed in a place that I wouldn't, that process specifically, that willingness to try and understand, that's incredible, and it is a process of deconstruction. I'm not saying that everybody has to go out and learn Arabic, okay? I have not personally done that. I'm still working on Spanish right now, and for me, my deconstruction just looked like a lot of reading. So much reading, so many audiobooks, so many articles, podcasts, debates, studies. It looked like going to college for me and taking advantage of the speakers and participating in the Muslim Student Association Hijab Day event. It looked like leaving my small town and living in California and then in Colorado. And despite all of that, I am still learning a lot. I have a lot left to learn. Deconstruction for me looks like losing my faith, and that's okay. That's where I found my peace. But for my loved one who did the intense soul searching for years, they found their peace in a version of Christianity that I've walked away from. So this is to say that deconstruction doesn't only offer atheism or renewed belief either. Some people read other religious texts and find them more compelling and convert, but some people find a form of spirituality that works for them that they can do on their own terms with their own personal God. There's a million options out there, and spirituality is different for everyone. To me, deconstruction is the process of opening your eyes to these options and selecting one, even if it's the same one you had before. For a moment, I want to talk about why deconstruction is such a fear-filled topic and why people avoid it so much. I want to talk about why people who have questions and are deconstructing in churches everywhere would never say it out loud, despite being in places that potentially would allow those types of questions and dialogue.
I just go to church, and the whole way here I was debating whether or not I wanted to talk about this. I made a video saying that I go to church basically because of the routine, and that's 100% what it is for me at this point. I would even go so far as to say it is tradition for me in my life, and it's one that I choose to honor because it's something that I enjoy and value. I guess I've been properly deconstructing my faith for the last 3 years or so. I was baptized when I was 8, and I was really Christian. I'm injured. I was pretty deep into it up until I was 21, 22. But even throughout that entire time, it was like a cycle of being super convinced and then questioning kind of everything. I'd say one of the threads that I've always been pulling out as far as Christianity goes is heaven and hell and the idea of eternity. Because over the course of my experience with faith and religion, I would say I was much more convicted than I was convinced. So I would ride the wave of feeling very convicted about faith, usually as a result of church camp or a specific sermon or conversation with someone that I found to be very convicting. Then it would always come back around to the fact that I wasn't really convinced about the things that I think you need to be convinced about in order to really do Christianity. Heaven and hell is one of the big ones. What I was convinced about was that I was a deeply sinful person who felt a lot of shame and then a lot of anxiety about my shame and how deeply sinful I am, and that I needed to be saved. And that's when I would start grasping and then get back to that convicted phase. Something I've been realizing as I've been deconstructing is that a lot of the shame and anxiety that I still struggle with today is largely due to the fact that I was convinced that I needed to be saved and that I am not good enough. I was not born good enough. And I will never be good enough without this thing. Deconstruction part is important, but ultimately my goal is to reconstruct, to get rid of the beliefs that are actually really damaging, not only to me, but to other people.
And we've already talked about the types of topics that can cause someone to deconstruct and how the process is long and painstaking. But we haven't talked about why it hurts so badly to go through and why it can be so isolating. Religion is the framework for the way you view the world. And for American Christians, this oftentimes also informs much more. The way that you dress, who you marry, how you get married, your sexuality, whether or not you have children and how many children, how you vote, and so much more than that. When you question the framework, you question everything. For some people, deconstructing could mean asking themselves if they really should have had children at all, or at the age they did, or the number of kids that they did, or with the person that they did. That is scary. It could make somebody question if their marriage was really led by God or if they just felt like it was the right thing because that's what they were taught. That's scary. What if the marriage they were clinging to for religious reasons suddenly didn't have that religious glue anymore? What if long suffering was no longer a virtue? There are people who have deconstructed who would have made other choices. They love their children, but they might not have allowed God to completely manage their family planning, right? They love, their children that they had with their spouse, but they divorced due to some basic incompatibilities, the product of a religious marriage at 18 pressured by their loved ones. They wouldn't have done these things if they would have had other opinions. But how can they now speak on this openly without making their children feel like a regret? How can they warn others without sounding bitter about a failed marriage? The voices that speak honestly about their experiences are growing, and they represent a much larger group of individuals who are living lives informed by beliefs that they no longer hold.
The fact that I have to raise 8 children that I would not have chosen with the knowledge I have now has been a very painful thing for me to reconcile. Part of me wonders if I wish my kids didn't exist, and I do. I'm mad because there's a version of me that was so excited and happy that I was told to have more kids. So now, what do I do when my 2-year-old throws his body on the floor and my first thought is, you shouldn't be here? I am working on all of this, and I know that someday I'll feel better, But I want you to know that if you're here too, it's okay, and maybe we'll figure this out.
Guys, I want to know your opinion on this, because for me this is how it lays. But if it wasn't for the kingdom of God, I would not have children. No, kids wouldn't see me. I've always wanted to be the rich auntie. I've always wanted to be someone who, just didn't have kids.
There are people who have deconstructed and realized the seemingly permanent harms of purity culture. There is shame wrapped up in these topics, and it is compounded by the church's response when people speak out and speak up. Too often, a young mother speaking up against the potential difficulties of young marriage and young motherhood is told that she just wants to live in sin, or is lazy, or doesn't have a heart of service, or a strong enough maternal instinct. They're told they're selfish. Too often, the individual is blamed for the harm that they experienced. The cost of warning others about the potential damages is extremely high for people that are currently in the church. And it's not just bad for people like me who share openly, publicly, in an online platform about these topics. Be nice to me, I genuinely do take your thoughts to heart, but I ultimately understood the risk when I got onto the internet. For the general deconstructor, though, it's not anonymous people saying that they must have never really believed in God. It's their own parents, their siblings, their friends from childhood. It's their own communities and families telling them that they need to get right with God and calling them out and telling them to stop complaining, that they shouldn't let their children hear them speak about waiting before having children or waiting till you're stable to get married. To be clear before we go too far, because I feel like I have to be, some people that get married young and have lots of kids are happy and thriving. I personally have family members who followed this life path. They love it, and I love that for them. To me, that's feminism, is making that choice on your own, but making an informed choice, right? Like knowing all of your options and then actively choosing that. I have friends who got married young and are still married today. I love them and their spouses. So this isn't saying it's always going to fail. It's just, again, about knowing your options and knowing that there's not one right option. Young adults deserve to know what their options are, and they deserve to be able to make an educated choice.
After leaving Christianity, I don't see a lot of people talking about the immense amount of pain that you still carry after leaving, because if I really, really think about it, Christianity stole so much from me. It stole so much from me. And I think it's really important to give yourself the space to grieve what a religion stole from you.
They deserve to family plan properly, and they deserve to have the chance to build and grow. I'm not saying that no young people should get married. I've seen horrific parents who are first-time parents in their 40s, and I've seen incredible parents who became parents at, 18. The fundamentalist evangelical church in the United States is anti-birth control as well as pro-life. And the fundamentalist evangelical church in the United States also encourages young marriage on the basis of shared values and shared faith alone. Fundamentalist evangelical church in the United States requires women to be submissive to men and then God, and for the men to lead them. The fundamentalist evangelical church in America requires you to be straight, cisgender, and to marry as such. And listen, you guys, are there people whose best life is truly lived in a cisgender or opposite sex marriage where, they got married at 18 and immediately had 10 children? Are there women who will never need to use birth control for medical reasons, have complicated pregnancies, and wants to just allow God to control their family planning? Yes, there are. And for those people, if that's you, I'm happy. But there are a lot of people who don't fit that mold. I myself don't fit that mold. I've needed birth control to manage periods and cysts for a long time. I was not financially or emotionally ready to have children early in my 20s, and birth control once again served me there. I did not have to find a Christian man that I wanted to marry by age 18, and so instead of just finding one and getting married, I let go of a timeline and found freedom. I'm getting married this year at 29, and I'm absolutely a geriatric bride by a lot of people's standards, by my hometown circle standards, and that's okay because I'm living My dream, well, my friends and certain family members are living theirs, right? With their perfect, gorgeous babies and their spouses. And that is wonderful. But again, people need to know that they have these options to make the best choice for their future. I personally also didn't want to be submissive to a man. I wanted to spend my 20s learning and traveling and exploring the world and investing in my education and career, and I did that. I'm proud of who I was then because that version of me invested. I didn't want a spouse who felt that his God-given role was to lead me, so I didn't do that. But the reality is, I'm kind of a bit of an anomaly. Not in the sense that I'm special in any way, but in the sense that I got extremely lucky. Not everyone got to see enough of the world before they made permanent decisions that shaped theirs. Some of my homeschooled friends weren't allowed to read books even without their parents reviewing it first. Their music was monitored. Some of these people didn't have the opportunity to think beyond and to realize their options. If living these ideals is the only option that doesn't result in eternal torture and suffering and separation from your loved ones, then you really only have one option. I got lucky. I often think about how easily it could have been me. What if I would have said yes to marriage proposals that I received earlier in life? These choices did not come without cost, without guilt, and without shame. They didn't come without the weight of the judgment that I received. When you ask me how I deal with the comments attacking my character and personhood from a spiritual angle without getting angry, it's because I've heard this from the people that I love in my life personally for the last decade. Deconstructing is a big deal because when you question the path, the life goals, and the milestones, you also question the morality and goodness of the life paths of those around you.
One thing I realized since deconstructing from religion and like walking my own path is that religious people aren't necessarily triggered by the fact that you don't believe what they believe. They're more triggered by the fact that you're not bound by the same limitations that they've essentially placed on themselves. When they mention like the devil and hell and you don't get scared and you don't tremble at that thought, they can't fathom like, why are you not scared and I'm scared of this thing? Even when you mention your disbelief in the external God, it's hard for them to fathom how they need this thing, but somehow you don't need it. And when that doesn't work, that's when the nice, nasty spirit comes out. Oh, I'm going to pray for you. Oh, you'll see one day you'll meet your... It's like they almost start wishing bad on you so that they can bring you into their belief. And it's because they need the validation of other people believing in what they believe in to feel right and convicted in their belief. You simply saying, I don't believe in that, it doesn't scare me, I'm not worried about that, is triggering to the fact that they believe in that, and that's the limitation that they've placed on themselves. And that's why they start coming up with these narratives. When people get blessed who don't believe in God, they say the devil blessed them. But when people get blessed who believe in God, they say that God blessed them. The whole time, both of y'all just put in work to get what y'all wanted to get. Or when bad things happen to people who don't believe in God, they be like, oh, see, you need to be coming back to God. But when bad things happen to people who do, they tell them it's a test. Like, they just create narratives and scenarios to try to make themselves comfortable in their own belief. Because deep down, they know people do fine without the belief.
Each move that you make is a stark reminder to them of the differences, of how you have chosen not to live their life. The contrast makes them question if they had to live their life the way that they did, if there perhaps were other options available to them, even if it mentally seemed like there wasn't at the time. When being long-suffering loses the religiosity behind it and just becomes suffering, it no longer feels virtuous to look back on. It feels unnecessary, and it feels painful. It can be enraging. It can be devastating. Leaving the religion sends shockwaves through your community wider than you could ever imagine if you aren't in a faith community or you've never left one before. It feels as if everybody takes it personally, and this immediate reaction can suck those deconstructors right back in. For those that have witnessed someone leaving, the way that the congregation whispered after and stopped inviting them around, it makes an impression on you. You learn not to do the same thing if you don't want the same treatment. And you learn the playbook for how you're supposed to react when somebody else leaves. You help repeat the cycle. Deconstruction destabilizes your views on everything, from family to children to politics to how you use your money. It destabilizes your core relationships with religious family members and with religious friends. It isolates you as people who once praised your character and intelligence and curiosity now view everything you do as rebellion or pot stirring. Many people permanently lose relationships and communities when they leave, and rebuilding takes a long time. Years. It's not easy to find and build communities, starting over like you're in a completely new place. It's really hard, and all of this together makes it a painful process and makes it terrifying. Coupled with the fear of eternal damnation and separation from God, the weight of being wrong makes it damn near not worth it for a lot of people, so they silently lose their faith while maintaining a faithful lifestyle. What other choice do they really have? It's a process of stretching, of detaching, and of healing wounds created in the disentangling. It's about going through real grief and getting comfortable with not having all of the answers, knowing that you might be wrong and knowing that that is okay. Most of us don't have everything right. I feel like every single day I realize something new that changes my perspective, and it makes me realize how little I know today and how little I knew back then. What I don't know is so much greater than what I do know. It's humbling and it's terrifying, but it's also exciting. It's also painfully necessary. You guys, I want to give you permission to learn and grow and to change your opinions. I want to give you permission to be flexible when you get new information, and I want to encourage you to ask what options are available to you that you might never have even considered before. Deconstruction isn't about abandoning God or about raging against the church. For my Christian audience, it could look like just assessing what parts of your life God has actually commanded in the Bible and which parts have been culturally demanded. I have a lot of shame I'm still working through about previous beliefs or opinions I've held, but we can't let our shame of our past beliefs hold us back from growing into the future and changing those opinions, of acknowledging that we were wrong and that we want to be better in the future. Those versions of me then were just as real as the versions of me today, and I'm accountable for that. But I don't have to stay there. I can always work on expanding, on being more aware, and on being more compassionate. We all can. The process is painstaking and confusing, and it's hard, but it is worth it. You are worth it, and your future self is absolutely worth it, and will thank you for it, I promise you. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it this far into the video, please like the video, hit subscribe or double check to make sure that you are subscribed if you're not already. And if you want to support me even further, you can always leave a dove down below in the comments because that's my logo, or you can become a channel member to see these videos a little bit sooner than everyone else. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Please hang in there. I know that it's been heavy in America the last few weeks, but thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Stay safe.